The silence broke the moment the door creaked. The cold air in the room didn't stir, but something else did. His voice, barely a whisper, held the weight of a question no one wanted answered. Did you know? His words were heavy, the tremor in them betraying a truth that wasn't supposed to exist. Did you know who I really am? The air in the room thickened, the weight of the unspoken truth settling like a blanket. The question wasn't one he could take back, nor one she could ignore. She stared at him, eyes wide, the blood draining from her face. There was no escape. His voice carried 1,000 whispers, all of them urging her to face a truth she had never prepared for. But she already knew. She had always known. She had just been too afraid to see it, too afraid to confront the darkness staring back at her through his eyes. She had spent years thinking she understood him. They had lived next door, shared small talk over coffee, exchanged pleasantries like neighbors should. But now, the realization hit her with the force of a freight train. Everything she thought she knew was a lie. He wasn't just her neighbor. He wasn't just the man she'd waved to from across the fence. He was someone else entirely, someone capable of unthinkable things, someone who had been hiding in plain sight. She couldn't move. Her feet were cemented to the floor, her chest tightening with every breath. She had to ask. She had to know, even though part of her wanted to shut the door and pretend none of this was happening. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The words slipped from his mouth like venom, twisted and deliberate. "You never saw me, did you? You never truly saw me?" Her breath caught in her throat. "No, she began to protest, but he cut her off, his tone low, almost mocking. "You were too blind to see what was right in front of you. The neighbor who always smiled, always helped. You never saw what I could really do." The realization was dawning now. Her stomach churned, not from the nausea of the truth, but from the realization that she had been living in the same house as a monster, and she hadn't even known it. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of her life, the small moments she had missed, the signs she had ignored. She thought she knew him. He was the guy who helped carry groceries, the one who always waved with a smile. But this man standing in front of her wasn't the person she had known. This was a stranger, and she was terrified of him. She stumbled backward, the air turning cold. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. Her voice was trembling now, raw with fear. His laugh was dry, devoid of humor. "Nothing you can do will change anything now. It's too late. You've already seen me." Her mind screamed for an escape. Every instinct told her to run, to scream, to get out of there. But she was paralyzed, trapped in this sickening truth. "Why? Why now?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Because you're the only one left who doesn't know, but you will. You'll know everything. All of it." She couldn't escape the suffocating silence. Every corner of the room felt like it was closing in on her. The truth hung in the air like a thick fog that she couldn't see through, let alone breathe in. Her heart raced, her mind scrambled to make sense of the madness. Was this real? Or was it some nightmare she could wake from? "Why did you do it?" Her voice was a hollow echo, the question barely a whisper. She didn't want to know the answer, but the weight of the moment demanded it. The man, her neighbor, her friend, was now a stranger, and the gulf between them seemed vast and irreparable. The calm facade he wore had shattered, leaving only the cold, dark truth behind. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs betrayed her. She stood frozen, caught between flight and the unbearable need to understand. "You never asked," he said, his voice low, almost pitying. "And I never gave you the chance." She stumbled backward, barely able to process his words. She had heard them, but they didn't seem to make sense. You didn't give me a choice." The words came out harsh, like she was trying to convince herself as much as him. But deep down she knew the truth. He had never intended to give her one. For the first time, her mind snapped to the reality of the situation. The man she had known, the one she had trusted, had been playing a dangerous game. And she had been his unwitting pawn. How long had it been going on? How many times had she walked right past him without seeing the darkness that simmered underneath his calm exterior? Her breath quickened, her pulse hammering in her ears. "What do you want from me now?" The question burned, but she knew the answer already. He had wanted this from the start: control, power, and to see her unravel. The silence that followed was deafening. Neither of them moved, neither spoke. The room felt too small now, the walls pressing in as if the very air was thick with the weight of everything unsaid. Finally he broke the silence, his voice barely a murmur. "I never meant for you to find out. But now you have. And there's no going back." His tone was cold, clinical, as if he were discussing a distant problem he had no emotional stake in. "I didn't want this to happen, but you kept asking questions." Her heart clenched as the full gravity of his words sank in. She had been asking questions. Questions she thought were innocent. Questions that had now opened a door she could never shut again. "I trusted you," she whispered, the words tasting like ash on her tongue. "I trusted you." "You should have never known," he continued, stepping closer. The air between them grew heavier with every word, every movement. "But now that you do, there's no undoing it, no escaping it." His voice was strangely calm, even though every step he took toward her was deliberate, calculated. Her body screamed for her to flee, to escape the predator who had once been her neighbor, her friend. But her legs refused to move. She stood rooted to the floor, unable to process the truth of what was happening. "What are you going to do now?" she whispered, barely able to breathe as the words left her mouth. His gaze hardened. "You can't run. You've seen me. And I don't let people walk away once they've seen what's behind the mask." Her world had collapsed in on itself, each new revelation crumbling her reality. The man she had known, trusted, was no more than a figment of the past. "Why me?" The words came out in a broken gasp, the question no longer just about his intentions, but about her own role in this twisted reality. He paused, the briefest flicker of something passing through his cold eyes. "Because you were the last one left who didn't know. You were the one who asked too many questions." His voice dropped lower, darkening with a dangerous edge. "You were the only one who could see the cracks in the facade, and now—" He stepped forward again, his presence overwhelming. "Now you'll understand why some things are better left unseen." It wasn't until that moment, when she stood frozen, her legs unable to carry her any further, that she fully understood what he had meant. There was no escape. His words, dark and chilling, had been more than mere threats. They were a cruel reality she could no longer deny. "You never really had a choice," he said, his voice a low whisper that echoed in the small, suffocating room. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder of her entrapment. Every attempt to run had only brought her deeper into his control. She could see it now, the cold precision in his every movement, the way he spoke as if everything had already been decided. She was nothing more than a cog in his dark, twisted game. "You're not walking away," he continued, his eyes gleaming with something dangerous. "You're here for a reason, and you will stay here until I decide otherwise." "I don't want this," she whispered, the words heavy with a desperation she couldn't mask. "I didn't want to know. I didn't want to see you like this." The tears began to well up, but she fought them back, forcing herself to stay composed. "Why did you make me see this? Why couldn't you just let me live in ignorance?" The man's expression softened for a moment, but it wasn't sympathy that flickered across his face. It was something far more unsettling. "You never understood, did you?" he said, almost gently. "You think you were innocent in all this, but you were never innocent. You were always a part of this world. You just didn't know it yet." Her mind spun, her stomach twisted in knots. The man she thought she had known, the man who had once seemed so harmless, was now a predator, and she was his prey. She wanted to scream, to escape, but there was nowhere to go. Her world was shattering. Piece by piece, the comforting reality she had once known was crumbling away. The man before her had never been her neighbor, never been the friendly face she had waved to every day. He had been a lie, a mask he had worn to keep her in line, to keep her from seeing the truth of what he was. And now that mask was gone. "Do you remember the first time you asked me about my past?" he asked, his voice calm, as though they were having a mundane conversation. "You were so naive, thinking you could peel back the layers and see who I really was. But I let you dig. And now. He let the sentence hang, unfinished, the threat left in the air like a suffocating fog. She could hardly breathe as the weight of his words pressed down on her. The truth was worse than she had ever imagined. A chill swept through her as the final pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. She had been nothing more than a pawn, a tool to further his dark agenda. Every interaction they had shared, every smile, every word exchanged, had all been a lie. "You think you've been living in a world of your own making," he continued, his voice soft, almost pitying. "But the truth is, you were always part of this, and now there's no going back." Her heart sank. She couldn't breathe. The suffocating grip of his words was too much. There was nothing left to fight for. No way out. She was trapped, and he was the one who had locked the door. The realization was overwhelming, crushing her under its weight. "You can't leave," he said, his voice steady, unwavering. "Not now, not after everything. You've seen too much, you know too much." His tone was not one of anger, but of calm, methodical inevitability. "And you will stay until I decide otherwise." The weight of his words settled on her like a physical force, pressing down on her chest, making it impossible to breathe. She had no strength left to fight him, no will to escape. She was broken, shattered by the truth he had exposed. I didn't ask for this," she whispered, the words escaping her lips in a ragged, broken breath. "No," he said softly, almost kindly. "But you got it anyway." She had come to a terrifying realization. She was no longer just his captive. She was his willing accomplice, whether she wanted to be or not. Every word he spoke, every movement he made, felt like an invisible thread drawing her in deeper. The very air in the room seemed to pulse with the weight of unspoken decisions that had already been made, long before she ever knew what game they were playing. "You can still walk away," he said, as if giving her an illusion of choice. But there was no choice anymore. The room had become a prison, and no matter how much she begged for the door to open, it remained closed. She felt the walls closing in on her, the air thicker, suffocating. "I don't have a choice," she whispered, the bitter truth sinking in. "Do I?" He didn't answer. The silence said everything. Her breaths were shallow, quick. The fight had gone out of her. All that remained was an overwhelming sense of defeat. She had spent so long pretending that there was a way out, that the darkness could somehow be escaped. But now it was clear. There was no escape. She had played her part, and now it was too late to turn back. "You think you're innocent?" he asked, stepping closer, his voice soft but filled with venom. "You're just like the others. You thought you could keep asking, keep digging, and that somehow you would find the truth. But you found it, didn't you? You found it, and now you're mine." The last of her hope flickered out. She wasn't just trapped in this room. She was trapped in this story, in this nightmare. And there was no end in sight. "How long do you think you can keep me here?" she asked, her voice shaky but defiant, the remnants of her spirit rising to meet the harsh reality. "What is it you want from me?" He smiled, a dark, knowing smile. "What I want is irrelevant," he said smoothly. "You've already given me everything I need." He paused, watching her closely, as if savoring the moment. "You'll understand soon enough. You always do." Her heart skipped a beat. The words felt like a death sentence, a slow, lingering promise. She wanted to scream, to lash out, but something inside her told her that it wouldn't matter. The man in front of her had already won. She could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her, suffocating her resolve. "You think this is over," she said, though even she could hear the uncertainty in her own voice. "You think I'm just going to accept this?" "That's the thing," he replied, his voice smooth and cold. "You never had a choice. The moment you walked into my life, you were already part of the story. This was always how it was meant to be." The realization hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't been brought here by chance. She had been brought here for a reason. Every move she had made, every choice she thought she had led her to this very moment. And now, there was no turning back. Please. The word felt foreign to her now, a plea that she never thought she would make. But there was nothing left. She had nothing left. Just tell me what you want from me. Why me? He stepped closer, his face inches from hers. You're not here by choice, remember? His voice was like ice, cutting through her. You're here because I chose you. And now you'll see the world through my eyes. You'll understand why this had to happen. She couldn't speak. Her throat felt dry as though the very words she wanted to say had been stolen from her. She was caught, trapped in a world she never thought existed. A world where she was no longer a person, just a pawn in someone else's game. The silence between them was suffocating. She couldn't escape it, couldn't escape him. The space around her had become an unbearable stillness, each breath a struggle, each moment a countdown to something she didn't want to understand. His words were etched into her mind, repeating like an unholy chant. You'll understand soon enough. But she didn't want to understand. She didn't want to know why she had been chosen, why she had been dragged into this madness. She only wanted to escape. But there was no escape anymore. The walls of the room seemed to press closer, the shadows thickening around her. She had walked into this nightmare willingly, but now that she was here, she had no way out. Please, she whispered, her voice raw with emotion. What do you want from me? What is it you need? He stepped closer, his eyes cold and impenetrable. I've already told you, he replied, almost bored. You're here because I chose you. Now, you stay here because I say you do. She felt her resolve shattering. The pieces of her former self, the woman who thought she had control over her life, were crumbling under the weight of his cold, calculated words. He had reduced her to a pawn, a plaything to be manipulated at will. Her mind screamed for answers, but she was too far gone. How long has this been your plan? She asked, her voice trembling. How long have you been watching me? Manipulating me? He smirked, his expression one of cruel amusement. You think this is about control, don't you? It's not. It's about something much deeper. You've always been a part of this. You just didn't know it. Her mind was spinning, trying to grasp the enormity of what he was saying. How could she have been a part of something so twisted? No. She shook her head. You're lying. I'm not, he said softly. You'll see in time. Every word he spoke twisted in her gut like a knife. You've always been part of this, he repeated. Everything you've done, every choice you've made, led you to this moment. You were never as innocent as you thought. She stumbled back, her heart racing. I didn't. Her words faltered, her mind struggling to process the horrifying implications of his statement. Was she complicit in something she hadn't even known about? Had she always been a pawn in his game? He watched her, his eyes cold, his voice calm. You were never meant to be anything more than a piece of the puzzle, and now you understand the role you've been playing all along. She couldn't breathe. No, she whispered, her body shaking. I'm not like you. Her thoughts spun in a whirlwind, each moment a blur, as she tried to piece together the fragments of her shattered reality. She had been played, manipulated, and now she couldn't even tell what was real anymore. You've taken everything from me, she said, her voice broken but desperate. Everything. You've destroyed my life, my sense of self. What do you want from me now? What's the point? He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing with a strange, unsettling satisfaction. The point, he said slowly, is that you understand. You understand that this was never about what you wanted. This was about what I needed. And now, you're a part of it whether you like it or not. Her heart sank. She had never been free. And now, she was nothing more than a cog in his dark, twisted world. Please, just let me go, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I didn't ask for any of this. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he watched her with those cold, penetrating eyes, as if he were deciding something. Then he spoke in a tone that was almost too calm. You never had a choice, but you'll understand that in time. The last vestiges of her will crumbled. She was trapped in a nightmare with no escape. She had tried to fight, to resist, but now she understood that the fight was over before it had even begun. Please, she begged again, her voice cracking. Let me go. But the man remained silent, his gaze unwavering. The room seemed to grow darker around her, as if the walls themselves were closing in. The days blurred together. Time had become irrelevant, a mere background noise to the suffocating reality that surrounded her. She had been trapped here for what felt like an eternity, her every move dictated by him, her every thought twisted into something darker. The walls of the room felt like they were closing in further with every passing moment, and yet she knew there was no escaping this. She could still remember the person she used to be, the woman who had dreams, who had hope. That person felt like a distant memory, a fragile illusion that had been shattered beyond repair. Her body felt like it was betraying her, her strength drained, her will to resist extinguished. You think you can break me? She finally spoke, her voice hoarse, but there was still a spark in her eyes. You think you can control me forever? He stepped forward, his expression unreadable. I don't need to break you, he said, his voice calm. You were never meant to be broken. You just need to accept it. You need to accept that you were always mine. Why don't you just kill me? She whispered, her voice breaking. Why keep me here like this? His lips curled into a slight smile, the coldness of it sending a chill through her. Because you're not meant to die yet. You're meant to live with this. You're meant to understand that you never had control. You'll learn to live in it, just like everyone else before you. The weight of his words pressed down on her like a physical force. He had broken her, not with violence, but with the suffocating control he held over her every waking moment. She had no power here, no freedom. Her thoughts were no longer her own. They were his. I'll never accept this, she whispered, her voice filled with defiance, though her heart knew better. I'll fight you until the end. He laughed, a low, mocking sound. You're already fighting, and you don't even know it. She had learned to adapt to this new reality. There was no escape, no more attempts to resist. Instead, she focused on something else, the small, fleeting moments of clarity, the sharp edge of a memory that reminded her of who she had once been. Her past felt like a dream now, something that existed only in fragments. But those fragments were the only things she had left. I used to be someone else, she muttered, her voice barely a whisper. Before all of this, I was someone else. He didn't respond at first, but then, in a voice colder than before, he said, The past is gone. It doesn't matter anymore. But it did matter. It had to. It was the only thing keeping her grounded, the only thing that reminded her she was still alive, somewhere deep inside. Days passed, or perhaps weeks. Time was irrelevant in this place. She had learned to exist within the boundaries of the man's world, to surrender to the suffocating grip of his control. There were moments when the darkness would try to consume her, when the desperation to escape would rise in her chest like a wave, only to crash back down with the realization that there was no escape. But then, in the silence of her despair, she found something within herself that had been buried beneath the weight of her fear and defeat. A tiny flicker of resistance. I'm not like you, she said suddenly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Her voice was stronger now, her mind clearer. I don't belong in your world. I'm not like you. The man's eyes flickered with something, amusement perhaps, or irritation. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. You are like me, he said, his voice cold. You've always been like me. You just haven't realized it yet. Her breath caught in her throat. She refused to believe it. She wouldn't let herself become like him. Not now. Not ever. Even if you try to break me, she said, her voice growing stronger with each word, I'll never be like you. I'll never become what you want me to be. The man's gaze never wavered. He seemed to be studying her, as if waiting for something. For a moment he said nothing. Then his lips parted, and his voice, though quiet, was filled with a chilling finality. You think you're still in control, don't you? He said softly. You're not. Not anymore. You're already mine. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and for a split second, doubt flickered within her. But she quickly shut it down, pushing back against the growing fear. She had to keep fighting. She had no other choice. I'm not yours, she whispered almost to herself. Not yet, and I never will be. The air was thick with the weight of unsaid words. The final confrontation loomed between them, like the quiet before a storm. The man stood in front of her, his presence as commanding as ever, yet something had shifted, something unspoken, a crack in the carefully constructed facade. You still don't understand, do you? He asked, his voice quiet but sharp, as if he were explaining something elementary. You were never in control. You were never meant to be in control. She didn't answer immediately. There was nothing left to say. The truth had been laid bare, and it had left nothing but emptiness in its wake. He had broken her, not with force, but with the cold manipulation of time, mind, and patience. He had taken everything from her, her trust, her identity, her will. And yet, standing there in the darkness of the room, there was one thing he hadn't taken: her resolve. I understand perfectly, she said, her voice steady, though the ache in her chest could not be ignored. I know exactly who you are, and I know who I am now. And that's all that matters. For the first time in what felt like forever, the man took a step back. The control he had so meticulously wielded over her began to waver, like a puppet master losing their hold. You think you've won? He asked, his voice low, dangerous. You think you've defeated me by simply standing your ground? She nodded, her gaze unwavering. No, she replied, her voice firm. I haven't won yet, but I'm not your puppet anymore. And that's more than enough. The air between them crackled with the tension of 1,000 unsaid things. Her mind raced, but there was one truth that kept her steady. She had nothing left to lose. She was free, in a way that was unspoken, unbroken. He had taken everything, except the one thing that truly mattered: her mind, her soul. And that was something he could never control. You're nothing but a shadow, she said, each word laced with venom. You've spent so long hiding behind masks, manipulating people, using fear as your weapon, but at the end of it all, you're just a man who's afraid of the truth. His face twisted, a fleeting flash of anger crossing his features. You don't know what you're saying. You can't even begin to understand what I've done to survive. But the words were hollow now, fading into the air around them. They no longer carried the weight they once had. Survived? Or manipulated? I think you've confused the two. Her voice shook with the finality of it all. You don't scare me anymore. The realization struck like a thunderclap. The man, once a towering figure in her life, had become something small, insignificant. Her freedom didn't lie in escaping him. It was in no longer fearing him. And that realization was the final blow. For a moment, silence reigned, the stillness hanging like a heavy cloud between them. And then with a final deliberate movement, the man stepped back, his hand falling to his side, his eyes darkening. You think you've defeated me, he said softly, almost to himself, a trace of disbelief in his voice. But I'll always be a part of you. You'll never be free of me. She took a step forward, her voice resolute. No, you're wrong. I've already broken free. The man's eyes flashed with something cold and unforgiving, but the power he once held had slipped through his fingers, like sand through an open palm. I am the truth you'll never escape, he said, his voice brittle, his facade cracking. Not anymore, she whispered, the finality of it settling over her like a shield. You're just a memory now. She turned and walked toward the door, her heart pounding in her chest. The door creaked open, and she stepped out into the unknown. For the first time in ages, she was truly free. She didn't look back as she crossed the threshold of the door. The world beyond was unknown, a vast, uncertain landscape, but it was hers to claim. She had broken free, not just from him, but from the lies he had fed her. She had shed the weight of fear, of control, of manipulation. And in doing so, she had reclaimed herself. The air outside was cool, the scent of rain mixing with the earth. She breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the freshness of freedom. It was a bittersweet feeling, the remnants of what she had lost still gnawing at her, but there was something else there too, hope. She would never forget what had happened. She would never forget him. But she was done being his prisoner. She was done being a part of his game. And in that moment, she finally understood what it meant to be free,